So far, we have been building the foundation with intent. We began by recognizing who the learners are, or more importantly, who they are aspiring to become. We explored the thinking frameworks that sharpen both discriminative and generative intelligence. We clarified how value systems evolve and how learners can consciously recognize, establish, and deliver value through their contributions. Now, it is time to bring all of this into the real world. At its core, the purpose of a learner is not accumulation of knowledge, but problem solving. Real problems. Problems that exist in our systems, our institutions, our technologies, and our societies. One by one, learners are meant to recognize these problems, engage with them deeply, and solve them by leveraging their capabilities, while consciously establishing value through the solutions they create. This is how progress happens. This is how the world we want to live in is slowly built. But here is the real challenge. Meaningful impact does not begin with solutions. It begins with seeing. How do we recognize real problems amid noise? How do we identify what truly matters versus what merely appears urgent? How do we understand the core of a problem, dimension it correctly, analyze it rigorously, and avoid solving the wrong thing brilliantly? That is precisely what this series of talks is about, starting with this one. We will focus on how learners learn to perceive reality more clearly, think more structurally, and engage with problems at their root, so that when they act, their efforts translate into lasting, meaningful change. To truly understand real-world problems, and more importantly, their core, we need a stable foundation against which reality can be modeled, compared, and reasoned about. Without such a foundation, problems remain fuzzy, symptoms get mistaken for causes, and solutions drift without direction. This is where we introduce a simple but powerful construct we call the economic quadrants. At the center of the economic quadrants sits the actor. The actor can be an individual, a family, an organization, a startup, a government, or even an entire society. Everything in this framework is defined relative to the actor, because value, burden, comfort, and necessity are never absolute. They are always perceived. From the actor's perspective, the world can be mapped into 4 quadrants. On the left side, we deal with ownership and obligation. The top left quadrant represents assets, things the actor considers valuable because they generate income, advantages, or long-term benefits. The bottom left quadrant represents liabilities, obligations, debts, or commitments that absorb income, effort, or future flexibility. On the right side, we deal with living and operating conditions. The bottom right quadrant represents necessities, things the actor must have to sustain livelihood and basic functioning. The top right quadrant represents facilities, conveniences that are not strictly necessary, but significantly improve comfort, efficiency, or quality of life. A critical point to remember is this: all 4 quadrants exist as the actor perceives them. What is a facility for one actor may be a necessity for another. What counts as an asset in one context could be a liability in another. That is why the actor remains at the center. Now comes the most powerful part of this framework. We can rotate the actor. By changing who occupies the center, say, from a consumer to a provider, from an employee to an employer, from a citizen to a policymaker, the same situation reveals entirely different problem dimensions and dependencies. The problem hasn't changed. The perspective has. Going forward, we will use the economic quadrants as our foundational lens, first to represent the context of an actor, and then to analyze problems with clarity, structure, and depth. This framework helps us move from vague concerns to well-dimensioned problems, creating the conditions for solutions that are not just clever, but truly meaningful. As we deepen this framework, an important realization begins to surface. No actor exists in isolation. The moment an actor depends on others, markets, institutions, platforms, or communities, we move from an individual context into an ecosystem context. And when ecosystems come into play, our economic dimensions must expand accordingly. The core idea remains the same, but the representation evolves. When an actor relies on an ecosystem, assets are no longer just things the actor owns. They are often created, maintained, or amplified by asset managing entities. These could be employers, investment institutions, technology platforms, or partners that help generate or grow value on the actor's behalf. Similarly, liabilities extend beyond personal obligations and become tied to liability managing entities, banks, insurers, regulators, or contractual frameworks that structure, distribute, or mitigate obligations and risks. On the right side, necessities are no longer abstract needs. They are fulfilled by providers of necessities, organizations or systems that ensure access to essentials required for sustained functioning and livelihood. And facilities are delivered through providers of facilities, entities that enhance comfort, efficiency, or quality of life, even though they may not be strictly required for survival. What changes here is not the meaning of the quadrants, but the unit of analysis. We shift from what I have to who enables it. This extension allows us to model not just personal economics, but networked dependencies, systemic risks, and leverage points within the ecosystem. From this point onward, we will use this ecosystem-aware version of the economic quadrants to see problems more clearly, revealing where value is created, where friction accumulates, and where meaningful intervention can truly make a difference. Now let's ground all of this in something very familiar: a person living inside a community. Imagine zooming out slightly and observing the ecosystem that quietly supports that person's life. First, think about the asset managing entities you would want around them. Banks and financial institutions safeguard savings and investments. Educational institutions build capability and future earning potential. Healthcare agencies protect physical well-being. Security solution providers protect safety and continuity. These entities exist to build, protect, and grow value over time. They strengthen the individual's ability to function, contribute, and progress. Next, consider the liability managing entities. Loan providers step in when we borrow against the future. Doctors, clinics, and pharmacies manage health liabilities when something goes wrong. Lawyers manage legal exposures. Insurance agencies absorb financial shocks. Interestingly, some organizations live in both worlds. A bank that manages your savings becomes a liability manager the moment you take a loan. But those are different roles, often handled by different units. The function defines the value, not the logo on the building. Now shift your attention to the providers of facilities. These are services that enhance comfort, convenience, or enjoyment. Cable television, internet cafes, gaming parlors, dry cleaning services. They make life smoother and more enjoyable, but life usually continues without them. They operate in the nice-to-have zone. Finally, there are the providers of necessities, and this distinction is crucial. Vegetable vendors, grocery stores, restaurants, clothing and accessories providers, clean drinking water services. These are not optional. They sustain daily life. Under normal circumstances, an internet cafe is a facility, not a necessity. Yes, in rare situations, an urgent exam submission or a critical communication, it may feel like a necessity, but those are exceptions. True necessities are defined by continuity of life and basic functioning. Once you see this clearly, a powerful perspective emerges. Every entity in an ecosystem plays a role in managing assets, liabilities, facilities, or necessities. Confusion arises when we mix these categories. Clarity emerges when we recognize them and design systems, policies, and innovations accordingly. This lens helps us understand value not as abstract theory, but as something that quietly shapes everyday life. Now let's gently change one variable in the same scenario. Instead of a working-age individual, imagine an elderly person living in the community. Almost immediately, the ecosystem around them begins to reorganize, not because the categories change, but because value priorities shift. Asset managing entities now carry a different responsibility. Banks are no longer just places to store money. They are expected to offer doorstep banking services, home maintenance, security agencies, and remote healthcare providers rise in importance because the asset being protected is no longer just wealth, it is independence. Convenience becomes value. Accessibility becomes value. Liability managing entities also take on a more active role. Assisted living agencies, maid and cook providers, nurses and doctors on call, and ambulance services become critical. These entities are not just managing risks, they are managing vulnerability. Response time, reliability, and trust now matter more than procedural efficiency. Interestingly, providers of necessities remain largely unchanged. Food, clothing, clean water, these are still fundamental. What changes is how these necessities are delivered. Home delivery and ease of access become just as important as availability. Facilities, too, get redefined. Home delivery services, companionship agencies, and internet or remote communication providers move higher up the priority list. For the elderly, these facilities are not about entertainment alone. They are about connection, dignity, and mental well-being. What this scenario reveals is a powerful insight. Value is deeply contextual. The same ecosystem, the same entities, but a different actor reshapes what matters most. Understanding this shift is essential if we want to design systems, services, and innovations that truly serve people, not in theory, but in life as it is lived. Now let's shift the lens once again, this time to young parents living in a community. The moment a child enters the picture, the ecosystem around the actor reorganizes itself, not subtly, but structurally. Asset managing entities now expand beyond finances and property. Play schools, creches, and child care providers become central because they manage a parent's most valuable long-term asset, the child's development. Baby surveillance product vendors and child healthcare agencies rise in importance, protecting safety, health, and peace of mind. Here, value is measured not in convenience alone, but in trust and developmental outcomes. Liability managing entities also take on new meaning. Babysitter agencies, maid and cook services, and doctors on call become essential buffers against unpredictability, late nights, emergencies, and exhaustion. These entities manage risk, fatigue, and continuity, enabling parents to function reliably in their personal and professional lives. Facilities now shift toward growth and engagement. Home tuition providers, baby play zones, fun areas, and even baby party planners are no longer indulgences. They become structured environments for learning, social exposure, and emotional bonding. Even necessities evolve. Alongside vegetables and groceries, baby food vendors, education and toy stores, and baby clothing and accessory providers enter the core list. These are not add-ons. They are integral to daily life. What this scenario shows us is strikingly clear: the same community, the same categories, but a radically different value map. When life stages change, value priorities shift. Recognizing these shifts is the foundation for designing services, products, and ecosystems that genuinely support people, not just as consumers, but as humans in transition. Now let's completely change the actor, and with it, the logic of value. Imagine the actor is no longer an individual living in a community, but a large shop or store owner. The moment we do this, value stops being personal and becomes systemic. Survival is no longer about comfort or convenience. It's about performance, resilience, and scalability. For a store owner, the most critical assets are not shelves or square footage. They are high-performing employees because people ultimately drive execution. Alongside them sit high-performing systems and processes that ensure consistency at scale. Profit-making sales channels, both physical and digital, become engines of growth. Reliable partners stabilize operations, while a loyal customer base, strong sales volumes, and location relevance determine whether the business merely exists or thrives. But every asset casts a shadow, and that brings us to liabilities. Underperforming employees don't just slow growth, they drain momentum. Inefficient systems and outdated processes introduce friction and errors. Non-paying or debt-making customers quietly erode profitability. End-of-life infrastructure increases downtime and risk. Add to that warranty obligations, insurance commitments, and legal or operational risks, and you see why liability management becomes a discipline of its own. For a store owner, managing liabilities is not defensive, it's essential for stability. Now, let's step into necessities, the non-negotiables that keep the engine running every single day. Reliable access to raw materials and supply chains ensures continuity. Skilled employees and strong sales and marketing talent convert effort into revenue. Quality management and brand reputation protect long-term trust, while customer connection and efficient support infrastructure sustain repeat business. These are not competitive advantages. They are the baseline cost of staying in the game. Finally, we arrive at facilities, the accelerators. This is where leverage lives. Third-party brand development and marketing, audit and inspection management, and accounting automation reduce cognitive and operational load. Inventory, supply chain, and marketing automation increase speed and predictability. Storage optimization turns space into profit. Facilities don't replace fundamentals, but they multiply their impact. What this scenario ultimately shows us is this: when the actor becomes a business owner, value shifts from experience to execution, from comfort to control, and from individual needs to systemic alignment. Innovation, in this context, is not about doing everything at once. It's about strengthening the right assets, containing the right liabilities, securing the right necessities, and investing in facilities that unlock scale. That's how businesses move from running a store to building a durable, adaptive enterprise. Now let's take one final leap in scale. Imagine the actor is no longer an individual, a family, or even a business owner, but the leadership of an IT company. At first glance, this feels like a dramatic shift in complexity. Yet what's interesting is this: the framework doesn't change, only the nature of what fills each quadrant does. Let's start with assets, because for IT leadership, value creation is deeply people-centric. The most critical asset is a high-performing engineering team, supported by capable management that can translate vision into execution. Alongside this sits a portfolio of high-profit, well-aligned customers, enabled by a sales team that understands both technology and business outcomes. Subcontracted partner companies extend capacity and specialization, while HR and recruitment functions quietly safeguard the future pipeline of talent. Together, these assets determine how fast the company can innovate and how reliably it can deliver. Now look at the other side: liabilities. An underperforming team or misaligned management layer doesn't just slow progress, it compounds inefficiency. Loss-making or non-paying customers consume disproportionate attention while eroding margins. End-of-life infrastructure increases technical debt and operational risk. Add to that warranty commitments, insurance obligations, and legal or operational risks, and leadership quickly realizes that liability management is not a support function, it's a strategic responsibility. Next come the necessities, the foundations without which nothing sustains. IT companies live or die by skilled, technology-aware engineers, but talent alone isn't enough. You also need strong sales, marketing, and management professionals who can position capability in the market. Brand reputation and customer relationships establish trust, while effective office infrastructure and efficient support systems keep the organization functioning smoothly at scale. These are not optional investments. They are the cost of long-term credibility. Finally, we reach facilities, the enablers that amplify maturity and reach. Third-party employee engagement surveys surface cultural blind spots. External brand development and marketing sharpen positioning. Certification management and audits establish compliance and credibility. Industry conferences keep leadership aligned with where the ecosystem is heading, while lobbyists and advisory teams help navigate regulatory and industry dynamics. Facilities don't create value directly, but they unlock visibility, trust, and influence. What this example ultimately reveals is a powerful insight. As the actor becomes leadership, innovation shifts from products to people, from features to systems, and from execution to orchestration. The same framework still holds, but now it guides decisions that shape culture, risk, growth, and long-term relevance. And that's the real strength of this lens. It scales effortlessly from individuals to businesses to enterprises, while keeping value grounded in what truly matters at every level. As we close this part of the articulation, what should remain clear is this: the journey we have outlined is not theoretical, it is preparatory. It equips learners with a way of seeing, structuring, and positioning themselves before action ever begins. By learning to interpret context, recognize value boundaries, and align intent with real-world conditions, learners move from passive understanding to purposeful engagement. This foundation is what allows problems to be approached with clarity rather than impulse, with direction rather than reaction. From here onward, the conversation naturally shifts from framing to application, from building internal alignment to creating external impact. What follows is not about adding more concepts, but about learning how to use this lens to act responsibly, decisively, and meaningfully in the world as it is.